Fantastic. I hope that I do not disappoint. If you have not met me, my name is Dan Mitchell. I am the Assistant General Manager for Project Delivery and Operations. I also serve as the department's Chief Engineer. And I'm here with you this afternoon to spend a little bit of time talking about interviewing at your best. So the interview process can sometimes have some surprises for folks. Some of you are new to the department or new to the city and haven't been through a promotional process before. So I hope to give you a little bit of insight and then my recommendations for how to show up and do your best at your interview. Okay? So you should have a handout. I know they ran out and made more, but either you have one or your neighbor should, and that should help you follow along. I'm going to go through those points during the presentation, and that's what I'm going to use too. Okay, so let's start with the other side of the table. Okay, so I've spent a lot of time on interview panels over the years, and I want to share with you a little bit of insight into what's going on the other side of the table. Okay, imagine these people have been put together, depending on the type of interview panel it is. Maybe I should start with that. There are two main types of interviews that we have in the city. A civil service interview, that's the first step. That's the one all of you went through when your first experience with the city, when you got put on a list. Okay? So that first step is to get in the door and get put on a list, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And the second type of interview is the one that's done by the department. Okay? The first one's done by the personnel department. The second by the department to certify that list. So sometimes it's called a certification interview or the department interview to hire someone into the position. Okay? And there are rules about how many people and how far down in the ranking order you can go. Okay, but depending on the type of interview, we might have a little bit different panels. So a civil service interview, one that is the first step to get people ranked on a list, that usually involves folks either from the personnel department or outside of the city entirely. Some experts, sometimes from Caltrans, from other cities, from other agencies. And so these people generally are not working with each other every day, okay? So they're a panel put together. They may not know each other. They may not have worked with each other. So they're kind of nervous too. And they've got a big job, a big important job in front of them. And their job is to figure out how to rank you on this list, right? And then with the certification interview, those are people generally interested in directly interested in the hiring process, right? That are interested in the outcome, either the people that you are going to work for, or the people that have been selected as to represent those that you're going to work for. And so those people know each other, and they have a little bit more, I would say, a little bit different take, right? With their personal interest, and also we have more flexibility in how the certification interview is conducted. All right, so here are these folks, whether they know each other or they don't. They've been put together for a very important task, okay? To figure out how to rank you, how to score you. And they've been given a very structured environment, okay? They've been given generally set questions. They may or may not have been involved in preparing them. In a civil service interview, generally not. So these questions are foreign to them. They're becoming familiar with them just at the same time you are, right? Depending on where you are in the process. And so that's kind of an uncomfortable situation. And so to the extent that you can make it easy for them, you're doing them a favor. So that's my perspective, right? That you come to your interview trying to help make it easy for them, the interview panel. Okay, so you're going to come, usually there's a written exercise beforehand in either type of interview. And my advice there is take a deep breath, read the whole assignment, right, so you understand what the question is. Spend some time to outline your answer, and then plan your time. So if you have 30 minutes, take the first 5 minutes to plan out what you're going to write, and then manage your time throughout that period. Okay, a lot of people just jump right into it and then run out of time. They try to say too much, don't get to the second part. So I recommend that you spend some time to manage how you're going to spend your time. The second part, here's the list from your handout. The second part, if it's a certification interview with LADOT, we generally have some sort of simulation exercise or a presentation. Okay, so either you'll be given a presentation assignment ahead of time, in which case obviously you're going to spend some of your own time preparing that, practicing it, and following best practices for the presentation. Now, if it's a simulation, what we're really looking for is to put you in an uncomfortable situation and in real time see how you react. Okay? It's kind of like an improv. And it's not so much that you can practice that part of it, but it's supposed to give an unpracticed insight into how you react to an unusual situation. Okay, outside of that, there's going to be set questions that the interview panel may or may not be familiar with ahead of time, right? And they have to ask those questions of every candidate. So it may seem oddly structured. That's the way it's designed in an effort to be fair. But there are follow-up questions that are optional, or the panel can improvise a follow-up question if something you said interested them or something that they want to hear more about. So you should be ready for that. Then, after you finish the interview, they have to take all those questions. Generally, the questions are assigned to certain categories, okay? But they have set what I would call buckets of scoring. And each one of those, it could be, usually starts with work experience, the communication skills, depending upon the type of job it is. It might have analytical skills, leadership, management. Those are all considerations. And the interview panel is trying to put your answers, your responses to the questions, into those categories and figure out where you fit on the grading scale they've been given. Okay? All of that gets added up, and then they have to talk about those. So the interview panelists then, after they've already scored you, then they explore how their scores compare. And they look at, in each category and then overall. And they have to agree to a certain extent. If there's a place where they don't agree, they have a big difference, then that's something that they discuss and try to come together and explore why. Maybe one panelist heard something, another one didn't. And then finally, all those scores, if it's a civil service exam, all of those scores are added to seniority credit based on the number of years that you have worked in the city. I think it's like a quarter point for every year. And then, it's a quarter point for every year, I think, in the management level, and I think it's a point every year before that, something like that. But there's seniority credit assigned, and then all of that goes into a list that's produced that shows how you rank among your peers. Okay? If it's a certification interview, then that rank is determining who's selected. And then how you're assigned to a position depends on the particular process. Okay? So that's what's happening on the other side of the table. Now, from your side of the table, a lot of people approach interviews and they think that they're going to react to what is given to them, right? They're put in a test of sorts and they're responding. I take a different approach. I say it's your show, right? That you've developed what you want to present to these people, and you're bringing it. And the questions that they ask you are just opportunities to share that information, and you don't know exactly what those questions are going to be. And so you'll present your information in maybe different order or from a different perspective, but you're still presenting the same thing because it's your show. Okay? Now, what goes into that show? Well, probably the most important thing is figuring out how do you separate yourself apart? How do you set yourself apart from your peers? What are those key differentiators that make you unique, right? What are the important things that you want to tell the panel about you that they remember after you leave? Remember, they may have a long day, you may be the first one or you may be the last one, right? They may have multiple days of interviews. And so at the end of the day, especially if it's a civil service interview and they've never met you before, what are they going to remember about you? They're going to remember the person that coughed and choked up on some of the interview questions, the person that gave them a stare and started shaking their lip and crying, That's not what you want to remember, right? You want to figure out what you want them to remember and keep reminding them of those things, okay? Where are your individual strengths? What are unique projects that you may have worked on? Maybe unique background, right? I've used things like, I'm the father of 4 boys, okay? So that's something memorable. Not everybody has 4 sons. So I try to create an impression and say, hey, if I can manage a household with 4 boys running around, of course I can handle this job. It's just, supervising everything. So whatever it is for you, you have to think and reflect about that. But those are the things that you want to keep, you want to build your interview around, and you want to help the panelists remember those things, okay? I think it's the best advice I can give you in that respect. And then keep in mind, if you were on their side of the table, what would you be looking for? What makes you not just a good candidate? Okay, some people think, well, I've worked in this section for 10 years. I know the most of anybody. Okay, maybe that's a strength. Or maybe your strength is that you've worked in a lot of different sections, or you've had unique experiences, or you, when you were in college, you did a study abroad and gave you a unique perspective that nobody else has. Whatever that is, okay, what makes you not just a good candidate for the job, but the best candidate for the job? Sometimes people think, oh, I really haven't spent that much time in each particular place. Okay, then your strength is that you have a wide variety of experiences, right? If some other people think, oh, I don't have that wide a variety, I've only worked in this one place for all that time. Okay, then your strength is you are an expert. Nobody else has the experience that you bring, right? So whatever it is, turn that into a strength for yourself. All right. Your key differentiators. Then, what are the examples of your greatness? Okay? Because you have to support that you're the best person for this job, right? With examples. Just you telling them that you're great is not enough. So what are the examples? I suggest you actually prepare a list. Okay, this could be something that you type up or just hand notes, whatever. Not a list that you bring, but a list that you memorize. Okay? You might even think of it as a library with different books on the shelves. And you have already identified the examples that really demonstrate how unique you are and demonstrate your strengths, those key differentiators. Okay? And when you're given questions in the interview, you're just going to go, oh, you're going to look in your mind at that bookshelf. You're going to pick, I think this is the right one to tell you about this time. And it doesn't mean that, let's say you have 10 examples, it doesn't mean that you're going to share all 10 of them. But if they're really good, really well-developed examples, then you don't have to share all of them. You share the most appropriate ones that follow the questions that you're given, right? And you'll be really impressive. You'll never give the interview that you want to have, right? But the panelists don't know the interview that you want to have. They only saw this one piece. And if the whole thing is really outstanding, then that one piece is going to be fantastic. Okay? And that's going to reflect what you can do. So, what goes on that list? You think about the projects or assignments that you've managed, challenges that you've overcome, conflicts that you've encountered. Okay? Some people think, oh, I want to hide that. Well, if you can turn that conflict into a strength, because you learned something from it, or you handled it in a particular way, even if it was badly, as long as you can recognize that you handled it badly, and now you do it differently, that's a strength. That's something that you want to show off and advertise. Presentations that you've given, especially if they're unique, at a professional organization, at a conference, to a particular audience, you presented something to the city council. Those are things to think about, consider for your list, your examples. Papers you may have written. And then the example, depending on where you are in your career, that example may or may not be from your professional life. It doesn't have to be from LADOT. It could be from another job that you had. It could even be in your personal life. maybe a role that you've had, a leadership role in scouting or in your church or some service organization, or as a coach, right? I coached soccer for many years. I learned a lot as being a coach in soccer that I can use in my job here, okay? If I can explain how that helps me, or how that's prepared me, fantastic. Like, if you're coaching a bunch of 10-year-old boys how to play soccer, I found, the skills are important, but understanding what really motivates each one of those kids, because it's not the same thing, right? Understanding what really motivates them, where they can fit in, what their strengths are, sometimes where you can hide them, right, on the field, then that helps you, and that gives you strength as a manager. So that's just an example, but you can think of what helps you in, or what your strengths are and what those examples are for you. And then you're going to incorporate those examples into your answers, okay? Just like I said, you're looking at that bookshelf that you've developed, you've memorized, you just reach in and pick one up. Because if you go in unprepared, a lot of these questions are going to be, tell us about a time this, or discuss that situation, or, right? And if you're going, I know I've got a good one, but I can't think of what it is, or I do that all the time, but I can't think of an example right now, that's a problem, right? But if those have already been developed, then it's real easy for you. Okay, then where is the content to support your knowledge? Okay, again, depending on where you are in your career, the questions may be geared more toward knowing things versus managing things versus just your skills and personality. But where can you get the information to support you? Okay? Number one is to review the bulletin very closely. The exam bulletin for the classification you're interviewing for is a good source of the types of skills that are required, the duties and responsibilities that are required for that classification. And for a civil service exam, particularly, they're using those to develop questions, okay? So that's one piece. Then the supervisor's toolkit. So that's the banner from that. The personnel department has put together a nice website for supervisors. It's got a lot of tools for supervisors, resources for supervisors. And if you're not yet a supervisor, you can use that to help you prepare, to think like a supervisor and to have the same resources. Okay? In there, there's even a document library. They call it Forms and Documents section. And I called out one of those is called the Supervisor's Guide to Department Employee Selection. Could that be helpful? Right? This is documentation from the personnel department about how they're supposed to hire you. What if you read that document? You had some insight into how they're supposed to hire you, so you know how to succeed. There's also a supervisor's manual that I've picked up. I'm not sure where the source is, but has a city seal. And there are selected chapters that I think are really helpful on discipline, grievance handling, performance appraisal, supervision, workplace violence. So everyone who's signed up there is going to get this document emailed out to you. Okay? So if you didn't have a chance to sign in when you came in, make sure that you do that with your email address. The other is called the Skillful Supervisor. Okay? I don't know exactly where this originated from. It was developed by Roundtable Learning Systems in 1979. But it's been copied and handed off from department employee to department employee over and over and over again through many, many years. Okay? It is not in print anymore, so I don't think it's a problem distributing it. I checked yesterday to make sure that it didn't start becoming in print. But at some point, probably in the early 80s, this class was given, and it's very helpful about the different elements of how to be a supervisor, and so that also will be shared with you. That's helped many times in interviews. And then also, you should be familiar with this, the online training academy that's available through the personnel department at la.easylearnu.com. Okay, so great web-based classes that you can take. Okay, so there you've got the content, you've got the examples, right? Now, what about your perspective? What about your perspective? A lot of people come into their interview thinking, all right, I'm going to tell them about all the things that I've done in this job and in jobs at my level and the jobs I've done in previous levels and activities, and I'm going to try to convince them that I'm ready for the next level, I'm ready to achieve up there to the next level, right? And what I say is that you get in your mindset, you're already at that level, okay? Get in that mindset, you've been working toward that level for many years. And you've been developing the skills, getting the experience, getting the training, and you already are at that level, but unfortunately you're still classified one level down, right? But you're already at that level, you already have the skills, and you've already thought through what you would do when they give you this opportunity. Because that should be your assumption. You're preparing for an interview to be recognized that you're ready for that next level, right? Okay, so if you're already at that level, then you should be thinking about, what am I going to do? What are my priorities going to be, right? Who are my staff? Let me just make something up. You can think, okay, what if I'm assigned to that particular division? Or what if I was in charge of my section? What would I do? Who would my key staff? How would I organize? What would my priorities be? What would I do on the first day? Would I call the staff together and say, oh, thank you, I'm so excited to be your new supervisor, right? Think about that. How about the first week, first month? How about the year, right? So you've thought through that. You've thought about, oh, but if I organize it that way, then, Sue and Bob are going to really clash. So that's probably not the best strategy. I should do this. So start thinking through those things, right? And so then when you're asked questions in an interview, you're not trying to project at that time what you're going to do when you're given that opportunity. Instead, it's really natural because you've already thought through it. You've already thought through your approach. You've already thought through the meetings you're going to have and the relationships you're going to build, and right? All those things are just natural. So you're just letting them know what you've already figured out. And so it's not as much of a stretch. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's see if there's anything I didn't cover going off the top of my head. Goals and strategies, organizing. Oh, motivating employees. Sometimes you come into a situation where you get a promotion into a job, and there was somebody already in that unit that was trying for the same job and didn't get it, right? That's awkward. How are you going to approach that employee? Because if you don't address that, they're going to be like, depending on who it is, right? But a lot of people will be like, I'm not listening to that. I'm not listening to Dan. He doesn't know anything. I've been here for 5 years. He just got plopped in here. That's some big mistake, and I'm going to prove it's a mistake. We don't want that. So instead, it's important to sit down with that employee. But could you get a question about that in your interview? Maybe, right? If not, you've already thought through it, and you might even add it into another one, the answer to another question that you're given. So that's really important. And then I talked about relationships. Relationships are really critical to being successful. Just relationships with your staff, with your peers, and with other agencies, with management, right? So if you've thought through that, how are you going to develop those relationships? How are you going to maintain the relationships, right? All of these things that normally people would think about if they got the job, you've already thought about because you're going to get the job, right? And so since you've already worked that out, the interview isn't so much a test as an opportunity to share what you've already done, what you already have worked through, right? And so it's much more natural that way, and less stressful for you too. Okay, so putting it all together. So now you're going to the interview, and you've identified your key differentiators, those things that you know you want to impress upon the panel, the things that are going to separate you out from everyone else, things that are memorable, the things that make you the best candidate for the job, not just a really good one or a really good choice among these 3 people. Okay? If you were in their shoes, I talked to you about what it's like to be on the other side of the table, right? So if you were in their shoes, they maybe don't know each other, they don't know you, they're kind of in this stressful situation to try to figure out, where do you rank among all these people? Which bucket should they put you in? Well, your job is to just relay, you just need to give me 100%, and I'm going to tell you why, right? I should be at the top of the list, and let me explain why. And that's comforting for the panel too. Oh, great. This is the top person. We'll just put them up there. One less thing to worry about. Now we got to figure out all these people in the middle. You don't care about those people in the middle. You're on the top, right? Okay. So you're helping them fill in all those buckets in the scoring sheet to give you maximum points across the board and give you 100%. Right? A lot of people miss that you have to fill up every one of the buckets. So you can have the best analytical skills and the best management skills, but if you can't communicate clearly, or more importantly, you can't share with the panel that you can communicate clearly, they won't be able to fill up that communication bucket on their list, right? Or work experience, if you think, oh, I don't have all of the work experience in this area, but you still have to fill up the work experience bucket. So you have to fill that in with other things, experiences you've had other places. So if they go, oh yeah, Dan really doesn't have that much experience in this area, but he has this experience over here that nobody else has, and he's explained to us how he can transfer that, the skills that he has, and apply it here. So I'm not worried. I was going to give him a bad score for work experience because he doesn't have the same experience of everyone else. But once I realized that he could take his experience from, managing parking meters and to managing people, I don't know, then okay, we can give him all the points, right? Okay, so you've got those key differentiators. So there will be a first question that is something like, tell us how your experience and education and training have prepared you for a position as blank, okay? Usually starts that way. Sometimes it's a little bit different, but generally it follows that formula. Your opportunity to talk about how you are prepared for this next step, okay? And so that's a given. So you should have that, what's commonly called an opening statement. You should have that ready to go, okay? It should be memorized, but not so much word for word that you sound like you're reading something, right? It should sound natural. It's more like you're telling your friends why you're the best person. Just highlight it. Don't tell them everything, okay? I've been in interviews where I say, well, back in 1972, I was first assigned to the unit under, this person. They don't need to know that, okay? They have your work application if they want to see all those things. You want to just give them the highlights. And you want to tell a story, too, about how that experience has worked up to where you are now. That you're ready for the next opportunity, right? It's not just, I was here, I worked in this section from this time to that time, and then I worked in that section from that time, then I was rotated here, then somebody, pushed me out, and I had to go over there. We don't want to know all that. Instead, you have a wide range of experience across all these different areas, and you're going to bring that and tell the story, right? And work in those 3 things. I suggest you have 3 things, those key differentiators that set you apart. And so they're already primed. They've heard those things first, okay? Next, they're going to ask you a whole series of questions. Those questions are usually associated with the buckets. So they have to ask you a couple questions about communication skills. They have to ask you a couple questions about, leadership or management or what have you. And those are your opportunities. Listen carefully to the question, right? And then share with the panel why you are the best person for this position that you're already ready to be in, right? And so you're speaking from the position of already having the assignment and explaining to them how you would approach it. And you've thought through those things, so you don't have to be nervous. You can be comfortable. And if it's a knowledge-based answer that has to do with discipline or motivating employees, that you're trying to pull up certain techniques that you've memorized from the content, great. But then you're going to pull out an example, okay? Depending on how long the answer is. But this is kind of the general approach, okay? So you tell them what you're going to tell them. That's that opening statement. Then you tell them in the questions. You give them your the content that's from the knowledge that you gained looking at those references. And if you don't know, you pivot to something you do know, or how you would approach it, okay? Then you add an example if you can, and then to support it, and then finish with your approach, your particular take on that, okay? And so if they ask you a question about, something very specific that you don't know, like, I don't know, maybe you're blanking out, you don't remember the steps of resolving a grievance, right? Then just explain what your approach would be. It doesn't mean that you need to get a 0 for that question because you don't know the steps to handling a grievance or the steps to progressive discipline. Maybe you haven't handled that directly, so it's not familiar, right? But you say, but I know where to get the information, right? And I know how to approach the situation. So explain it, right? How would you address a grievance, or how would you address a progressive discipline type problem? Maybe you don't know all the right words, but it's there in the supervisor's manual. I looked at it when I was preparing for this interview, right? So you know where to get it, and you would use this and you would apply that approach. And you may supplement it with an example of how you handled a difficult situation. Maybe it wasn't formally following those steps with progressive discipline, but maybe it was babysitting your little brother when you were, I don't know, whatever it is, right? Because you have experience with that. Okay. And then weave in your key differentiators throughout the process. They're going to ask you probably between 7 to 10 questions. Throughout the process, you're going to keep reminding them about those 3 things. So if one of them, was, I don't know, my expertise in signal timing, okay? Or then I'm going to keep going back to that because I've developed this expertise. And maybe that's not strong enough, but the fact that I can develop within a few years the capacity to be an expert, and I can transfer that somewhere else. And I keep reminding them of that, okay? Throughout the questions. Keep coming back to those points to make it easy to remember. And then you're going to demonstrate your emotional intelligence. That's a new element that's come around the last, 5 years or so into the city. I think it was around in private industry a little earlier. But these are, one question that people laugh about is like, tell us what makes you angry. Okay? I don't know that I've ever heard that in an interview, but that's the kind of thing. Now, how do you answer a question like that? What makes you angry? Right? Well, you're going to be honest. But what the panel is looking for is your emotional intelligence. That is your ability to identify your own emotions, control your emotions, to manage them, right? And use them in a positive way. And then on the other side, to be able to identify other people's emotions and manage them, right? And there are all sorts of techniques around that, but that's something you should definitely spend time with, right? Like, I can see that you're getting tired with this presentation. Perhaps I could, right? It's that sort of thing. Okay, and then some people have a real hard time with mistakes they've made in the past, okay? Or, on the other side, bragging about stuff that they've done. Some people feel really uncomfortable bragging, right? They feel like, I don't want to talk about all those things I did, people saw that. I'm just going to keep doing my work, and I don't want to brag about what I did. You're not bragging, okay? You're not boasting. You're sharing. You're sharing to support your contention that you are the best person for the job, okay? So, when you're doing that, you should be honest, you should be open, you should not embellish, and you should definitely not misrepresent. You should not say, I did all this, if you were one of a team of 20 people that did that, right? So, well, yeah, I did do it. Technically, all I was doing was emailing out the meeting notices, but I did do it. That's not what we want, okay? Don't misrepresent your involvement, okay? But also don't embellish it. All right. And you also don't need to raise the negative. You don't need to say, I was involved with Vision Zero. It was really important, exciting part of the team. But there was one day when I got sick and I really missed an important meeting. I should have been there. And after that, you don't have to say all that, okay? But you be positive. You share your contribution. But if you're called on it, certainly you would be honest, right? And if somebody asked you a question about a mistake that you made or a time that you got into an argument, then you should have those examples ready too. And what the panel is looking for is your capacity to learn from your mistakes, because people make mistakes every day. I make mistakes every day, and if you don't make mistakes, it means you're probably not pushing the envelope. You're probably not trying hard enough. So, but when you fail, you have to identify what went wrong and try to do something differently. Okay. So that's telling them. You're answering all of those questions, okay? And then you get to the end. Finally, they have standard questions they have to ask at the end. Maybe one about if there's anything in your background you want to disclose, okay? And if you have some skeletons in the closet, that's the time to share them honestly. But the interview has to end with, is there anything else that you'd like to add? Okay, that's the end of the interview. Is there anything else you'd like to add? And that's your opportunity to look at the bookshelf and see what books are still left there and say, you should never say no. You should never say, nope, that was it. I think pretty much covered it. No, you should look and see, was there something important? Was there a book there on the bookshelf that had a lot of flags in it that I definitely wanted to share? Or a particular example or project that I was really proud of? It should not be, an awkwardly long thing, but if there was something important, an experience that you had, I didn't ever get a chance to really share with you my involvement in the Vision Zero program. I touched on it, but I wanted to highlight that I was involved in this way and the other way, and I think that's really an important part of my background and experience that's helped to prepare me for this job and to demonstrate my capacity to do this. So that's okay, but then you're going to wrap up with coming back to your key differentiators, right? And that you hope that you've shown the panel that you're ready. If you've ever served in an acting capacity in one way or another, then that's a good time to make sure that you're driving that home. Not just that you've thought about it, but you've actually had that experience. And actually now, if you haven't had that experience, it's a great time to ask your boss, can I help with, I know I'm really busy in this, and I know that what I'm doing is important, but is there something I could help you out with? Because I'd like to get some more experience managing the things that you do, or if next time you're going to be out for a couple hours, if I can help you with something, I'll do it, or if you're out on vacation or so forth. Okay, so those are valuable when you're wrapping up, and you can say, not only have I thought about what to do, not only am I ready to do this, I've actually done it. Right? Maybe I've done sporadically when my boss is on vacation, or I took turns with my coworkers when my boss was promoted or retired. But that's your time to share. This is a no-brainer, guys. I go right there on the top of the list, right? And you'll remember me for these three things that I've done. Easy as pie, right? Now you go figure out how to rank the rest of those people. Okay. And so you want to create that last impression and thank them for their time. Okay, so that's how you're going to conduct your interview. Oh, I guess I didn't give you the second half of them. All right, well that's on the handout there. Thank them for their time, okay? But then you have to practice. Okay, so you're not going to be able to go into this environment if you haven't done it a lot before. You've got to practice. And just writing it all out, or just thinking about what you're going to say is not enough. You actually have to practice saying it. You can say it in front of a mirror. You can say it while you're on a walk or a jog. But you have to say it out loud. Just thinking it isn't enough. Because when you actually try to say what you know, you find out, oh, I'm fumbling over these words, or that really didn't sound very good when I said it that way. What if I said it this way instead? Okay? And then you say it over and over, and as you're saying it out loud, it becomes a routine, right? And then just in your regular course of speech, you're using those words to describe what you do. And then it's much more natural when you get to your interview. And when you're answering questions, you're not stuck because you can't remember the exact phrasing you put when you typed it up in your example list, right? Because you can just naturally explain it. You can record yourself, that may help, and then play it back. But probably most importantly, you should schedule mock interviews. Mock interviews with your supervisor, with other leaders, with friends and family, even if it's just someone else. Maybe it's your significant other. Give them a list of questions. Say, ask me these questions, and I'll go through the motions of explaining it, even though they already know the answers. Okay, so you can practice. And you also want to make sure that as you practice maintaining eye contact, because if I'm sincere about what I'm telling you, then I'm going to be able to look you in the eye and tell you. And I'll be pleasant. I'm not going to tell you like this, because I'm not going to really believe it, right? But if I practiced it, I'm comfortable. And then if I say, I really am the best person for this job, then you believe me. And I'm making eye contact with each one of you, and that's natural, okay? Because if you're explaining it like this, yeah, I'm really the best one for the job, and I've done a lot of things around, that's not very convincing, right? So you need to be pleasant, you need to try to relax and be comfortable, and make eye contact. Okay, then you're going to fine-tune your game. You're going to review the constructive criticism you've gotten. You're going to incorporate that into your preparation and your strategy, and keep going. And when the day comes that you have your interview, don't get hung up on whether you're scheduled first or scheduled last. Or some people, I don't want to be right after lunch. The panel's going to be asleep. Don't worry about any of that stuff, okay? Whatever time you get is going to be the best time to explain to them why you're the top person on the list, okay? But after you've done all that, it's showtime. So after all that preparation, you don't want to mess this up. You want to make sure you've double-checked the time and the location, right? I've heard bad stories about people that went to 200 South Figueroa instead of 200 North Figueroa or whatever. You don't want to make that mistake and then have to try to explain it. So you want to double-check the time and the location. You want to get a good night's sleep. You want to dress sharp. You want to dress like you are ready in your A game. You should dress like you are that supervisor already. In fact, that was some advice someone gave me many years ago. You should always be dressing like you're the next level up, because then people see you that way all the time. It's like, it's natural. Yeah, I can already envision Dan that way. Dress sharp, arrive early, and then relax. Okay, you have to relax in the moment. A lot of times they're running late. A lot of times I'm running late, okay, because we can't control how long interviews take. We try to keep them on time, but we don't want to cut people off. So just relax. You want to focus on, as you're sitting there waiting for your interview, you want to focus on what you're going to say. You can review your notes. If you're religious, you can pray, you can meditate, ask a higher power to help you, and then be confident. Okay? Knock them dead. So if you keep all those in mind, and this takes, I should emphasize, it takes a tremendous amount of preparation. You don't start doing this, when you get the call for your interview. Okay? This should start now. You should start preparing. You should always be ready. You should always be thinking, because really your interview is not just one half an hour or 45-minute period. Your interview is every day, right? It's how you conduct yourself in your job, how you conduct yourself in interactions with other people, to develop your reputation and the experience to support this interview. This interview isn't that big a deal. It's really important, but it doesn't have to be super stressful if it's natural to you. And it will be natural if you've spent the time to prepare. You will knock them dead. All right. Thank you very much. You have a few minutes if you want to stick around for any questions, if you want clarifications on anything I said, if you want to have anything to add, specific. Yes, Mr. Moshazar.
Well, being told before that in the closing statement, you don't want to go back to what you told them before. You just want to barely touch on it because they're already bored. They have interviewed a lot of people.
Right. So the question was, he's been told before that in his closing statement, he shouldn't go back and tell them everything that he told them before, because the panelists might be kind of watching their watch. They're kind of getting ready to go. That's true. You shouldn't rehash everything that you told them. You shouldn't make a whole case for why you are the best person. You've been telling them why you're the best person the whole time. You're just reminding them those key things, right, that you wanted them to remember, so that after the 10th interview, they remember, it's like, who was Mike Moshazar? Oh yeah, he was the guy who had this license and that experience and all. Yes, he's the one we needed to put at the top, right? Okay, so it doesn't have to be long, it has to be rich. Questions? Anything else?
Oh, I have one.
Yes, Lisa.
When they ask you a question, let's say it's equal employment opportunity, what happens is there a correct answer? Are they looking for specific answers? Like maybe management said we want them to touch on this, or is it that we're being compared with everyone else's answers? I was just concerned, how do you know what the correct answer is?
Right. So that's a great question. Do you have to get with every question, is there an exact answer that you have to recite or key things you have to say? Well, the people that wrote the question probably had those things in mind, but doesn't mean that you have to touch on all those things to get the full points, right? You're going to share what you know. You should definitely be prepared, but like I said with the progressive discipline, or and it's true of equal employment opportunity, or what are your responsibilities as a supervisor to support equal employment opportunities. You should know those things, but if you can't remember them, say what you know and share your philosophy, your approach, right? And yes, it's my responsibility to help my staff improve and get new opportunities, and to help them with their promotions and make sure I'm fair and equitable. If you know those things because they're part of your philosophy, then even if you don't say the exact words, doesn't really matter.
Oh, okay.
And if you remember some and you forget others, you say, I know there are some more that I'm not mentioning, and I know exactly where to get them. They're in the book on my desk, and that's what I would look at if I needed to do it. But this is part of my philosophy, and this is what I do. You want to fill the bucket, right? And so even if you don't know the exact words, you can still do well on the question. Anything else? No? All right. Hearing or seeing none, we'll close it up. You're welcome to come up afterwards if you have something you didn't want to ask.